If you're a business in 2025 and you don't have an innovation cycle within your business or a process to manage innovation, you might want to watch this video because it is so important for you to stay relevant and not be left behind. So when we talk about innovation, this is a subject that seems to be so important for some people, but to some other companies, it might be not so important because they're so focused in operations, or they might feel comfortable with what they have today. With the economy that we're in today and the circumstances that we have globally and everything that changes so rapidly, I can't stress enough how important innovation is, or at least to have that in the agenda as part of your business. Without further ado, I'd like to take you through what I think is the best way to manage innovation without having to spend too much money and too much resources and too much time on things that may not matter, but be able to still focus on what's next for the business, or even understand what matters the most to the business today. And the best way to do that is to recognize that there is an opportunity in every year, every period, every quarter, and just to be able to sit down and go through this together as part of your team meeting or stakeholder meeting, okay? So what we typically have in a company is an initiation of an idea, whether it's, should we have a new feature? Should we try this new product? Should we attempt to diverse into that other market, right? So let's call that initiation. So off the back of initiation, typically there's a project that comes from there. What companies do a lot is they jump into planning, like very simple planning, top line, not really documented, but they go into procurement almost straight away. So procurement is basically going to the market, and they're going to work on certain things like vendor outreach, reaching out to different designers, developers, tech company, to basically talk to them about their requirements based on that initiation that had done internally. So you've got vendor outreach, and then there's the procurement of tech stack or tech solutions. Now I'm talking in an example in the digital world, right? And then we've got the engagement of the partner. Engagement. Partner meaning agency, technology company, whatever it may be, right? But essentially we have this procurement process. And from there, what happens is execution, implementation or execution of the work. So let's just say execution. And in execution, essentially there's things like, if there are different tasks, such as, task number 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Then there's prioritization. And you have the implementation or production. Let's just call it production. And if we're talking digital, traditionally, although it's crazy to think that this is not so long ago, but traditionally, a lot of people would go in agile mode. So for example, we run production sprints, and you're going to be able to cycle whenever you need to, right? Cycle back like that. And then there's releases. So out of all of that backlog, there might be 3 features or 3 experiences that are releases. So releases. So I hope that makes sense. There's prioritization, there's production, and there are releases that comes off the back of production. So after it's executed, then there's this whole process of maintenance. Maintenance. And what that typically looks like is just an ongoing cycle of maintenance and updates, right? So that goes there. This is maintenance, maintain and update. This is very much an OPEX or operational expenditure. Execution is typically capital expenditure. Procurement is a CapEx as well, potentially. But anyway, the idea is from procurement, a lot of businesses would go straight to execution, and from execution, they would go to maintenance mode. And initiation was the thing that led them into this process, right? Now, as part of a design sprint and the design thinking principles that we run, we essentially expand this process and introduce this strategic planning or design. Let's just say strategic planning or strategic design process into this whole loop. So rather than going from initiation straight to procurement, we validate the thinking and the idea first through the strategic planning and design process. So essentially it goes here before ultimately that goes there. So what's involved here? And that's where we go back to the typical process of design thinking, which is if we have 6 diamonds here, and each diamond is divided into 2 phases, then we have this understand phase, there's the define phase, ideate, decide, prototype, and finally validate. So as we potentially know by now, understand means you're aligning business goals, you're aligning business questions, you're aligning aspirations and expectations. Define means you're defining those problems and documenting it in a certain way that it is clear to everyone. Ideate is when you start thinking about solutions towards that problem. Decide is deciding on which version for the idea or which options are we going with, which one is prioritized, where should we focus on, things like that. And then prototype is when you use whatever type of prototyping tool that allows you in a low effort way demonstrate your idea to the intended user and ask them through a validation process. So the idea is when you run a process like that, you will end up with clear requirements. So what you get out of this is clarity and confidence that you would otherwise not get if you're going to jump into the procurement process straight away just through business initiation. Because when you go through the vendor outreach, tech solution discussions and all of that, it will be so much clearer once you have a prototype with you and you have clear visuals as to like what the roadmap should look like from the business perspective. So what this essentially ends up being is a really strong brief for your procurement process that allows any type of agencies, designers, tech providers, any other partners to understand what your business requirements are and be a lot clearer for them. Now, I've done many of these processes before on behalf of my client, and whenever we go to procurement process, the partners, whether it's tech, design, technology, whatever it may be, they really thank us for that process because it gives them so much more clarity and it mitigates all of the risks that they would otherwise have. Now, coming back to the topic of this video, which is the ideal innovation cycle that you may want to consider as part of your business, is essentially going through this. So if I was going to just highlight certain things here, businesses will come with initiation, which is great. We need to validate that initiation through a strategic planning or strategic design process that allows you to procure and potentially rethink about the budget and whatever's involved. It may even stop there. It may even continue to execution and maintain. And this comes as a cycle, and that cycle is being managed, if I may add another thing here, it's being managed through change management. Change management, which is an art in itself. But if you have a facilitator that can help you with this, or internal team members or resources that can help you manage this innovation cycle through change management and be able to act as a nimble facilitator throughout the process, then rest be assured that your innovation process can actually be maintained in a meaningful way. All right, I'll leave it there. If you do have any questions, or if you wish to talk to me about your innovation process, or probably some of the challenges that you may have in your business, please reach out to me. We'll make sure that we have our contact details down below. All right, stay well and stay healthy. I'll see you in the next one.